All right, what's up, guys? I mentioned a while ago I was going to do some short videos on what it's been like giving up alcohol and reaching the 1 year mark. I'm going to try not to make this too long. So, first, I want to say what I feel like abstaining from alcohol has given me. I feel like organization, clarity, my energy is better, more disciplined. My health is better, more focus, drive, determination, motivation, and I honestly just feel great all the time. So those are the top 10 things that abstaining out from alcohol has given me. Moving on, I think it's important to note that I was never an alcoholic, and I'm not here to preach to anybody about how to live your life and tell you what choices to make. I mean, if something works for you, great. I'm not going to tell you not to do it. All I'm going to say is that for myself, this is probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, and I definitely don't take that lightly. So, next point, what it's like giving up alcohol. So, being that I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't drinking every day, whatever, I would binge occasionally, and sometimes I would get carried away. That being said, it was surprising to me how difficult it was to give up alcohol at first. Yeah, it was really surprising. I thought it would be easy, but I guess I had a lot more of an attachment to it than I thought I did. So the first 30 days, really, that's, if you can get it through 30, 45 days, you're laughing, because that's pretty much the hardest part. So, I mean, I definitely had times and periods where I had cravings for a drink, and I was surprised. I really wanted a drink. And so, you got to work through that. You can't give in and just do it. Drink if you're going to really try to stick with abstaining from alcohol. So what I was going to say here is, we live in a society where no one's ever going to call you out on a drinking problem. It's socially acceptable to binge. There's various periods throughout the year where it's totally fine to be drinking and indulging. Like the month of December is the biggest one for me. There's all kinds of excuses to go out and drink and go a little bit too far with it. No one's ever going to say anything because it's just been ingrained in our society that everybody has a drink. So that being said, what is it like then going through these kinds of situations and social situations where everybody's got a drink and you're the only one that doesn't? Honestly, it's not that bad. I don't feel any of that pressure. Because for me, I feel so much better without it than I do with it, that I would never think twice about going back to it. It's just not an issue. And the funny thing is, more people seem to be curious about what it's like not drinking than trying to give me a hard time about it. The irony for me that I see is everyone gives Bud Light and Coors Light and all of the light beers such a bad name, and then here I am sitting there with a 0% Budweiser Prohibition or whatever else is available if I'm out at a pub. So for me, it's pretty funny, because it's like, well, all of that negativity has been placed on the light beers, that the non-alcoholic stuff doesn't get any of it. It's hilarious, really. But either way, I really don't care what people say. If you want to roast me, go ahead. I don't care. So, social situations. What is it like going out to a pub when you're the sober one? Well, I already said, like, it's not that bad. But the non-alcoholic stuff is really starting to catch on. There's actually a lot of pubs. Almost every pub you go to now has at least one non-alcoholic beer available, which is pretty cool. And the best that I've seen so far was actually Dixon's. And because that's part of a chain of ownership, I'm going to imagine that their subsidiary locations have the same alcohols available. But they have 6 non-alcoholic beers available, which is really impressive to have half a dozen non-alcoholic beers available at any time. There was an O'Doul's, I think there was a Budweiser Prohibition, there was an Erdinger. If I remember correctly, there were 3 from Canada and 3 from Germany. So that's pretty cool. National Downtown has Erdinger available. The Ship and Anchor has Erdinger. And that's all I can remember off the top of my head. Most of the basic places at least have Budweiser Prohibition, or the O'Doul's, which has been kind of the old standby. And O'Doul's had a pretty bad reputation in the past, but honestly, I don't think it's that bad. The Budweiser Prohibition brew is pretty good. If I blindfolded you and give you a regular Budweiser and a Budweiser Prohibition, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Until 5 or 6 drinks later, there's no buzz. Which brings me kind of to my next point, where I think it's funny. When you drink a non-alcoholic drink, when would you ever drink half a dozen or a dozen of the same drink? It's like, well, are you thirsty? Then drink water. I mean, it's kind of funny to just, you wouldn't drink 6 cans of Pepsi, or you wouldn't drink 6 cans of Diet Coke. But when you're in a social situation, there's that pressure because the bar wants to sell alcohol. That's where they make their money. And you just keep ordering and ordering and ordering. And at this point, I think a lot of times the servers look down on you if you only order 1 or 2 drinks because it means they're making less in tips, etc., etc. But at the same time, they shouldn't be in the business to get people drunk. And that's usually what ends up happening. Aside from that, though, I've kind of stayed away from the pubs for it's been almost 4 years now. I saw what was happening in the oil industry. I was on the killing floor as soon as spring breakup came in March of 2015. It was like standing at the base of a tsunami. No one had any idea what was about to happen, but I totally called it. And we're still dealing with it 4 years later now. And actually, I think it's gotten worse in the last 1 to 2 years because the real effects are starting to be felt now. So I don't really go out to the pubs anymore. So now that I've been away from alcohol for a year, I think I want absolutely nothing to do with a lot of the situations where there is binge drinking and people just getting drunk off their ass. I already didn't really enjoy it that much, but when you play music or you go out to see bands play, there's always going to be a lot of people there just getting drunk, and I never really had any attraction to it. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about alcohol and stress. I mentioned in the beginning that I wasn't an alcoholic, but there were times when I did binge drink, and a lot of it had to do with stress that I was going through. It was prolonged, sustained stress of a very high level that even to this day I can't really talk about the full details, which is still kind of frustrating because as much as the issues I had have been resolved legally, I'm still not supposed to talk about it for a lot of other reasons, so I won't get into it. But basically it all boils down to I ended up developing PTSD, and this was something that I didn't really understand, and I ended up having this crazy. It was like an anxiety attack, but like something totally different and way worse than just anxiety. And I know anxiety can already be a terrible, debilitating thing, but I knew that something was up. So I ended up Googling my symptoms in that moment on the internet, and found out that it was basically like textbook PTSD. And that was hell to get through, because it's like a deeper level of anxiety, and it's not just anxiety. There's like depression and all kinds of other stuff like mixed in with it. Even if I didn't show outward symptoms, it was, yeah, man. I don't even know how to describe it. I can't really put it into words. So in the times when my stress level was the highest, it was like a subconscious thing. So when I'd go out with my buddies, instead of starting off with like a beer or whatever, I'd be doubles in a short glass on the rocks right from the get-go. I'd give myself a $100 allowance, and it would be gone by the end of the night. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and eventually it got worse until I got to the point where, for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't in control of my body anymore. And that was pretty frightening. So I did have an incident. I'm not going to say what that was. Not everybody gets second chances in life, but I took the warning call for the seriousness that it was, and immediately sought counsel from two friends who were recovered alcoholics. And they've been monumental in supporting me and helping me kind of get through a lot of the situations and trying to reframe things. So I thought, okay, well, what's it going to be like in the summer? Sitting on the ship and anchor patio drinking Lone Tree cider was one of my favorite things to do. But basically you realize that, well, you'll have the energy to go hiking later in the day or the next morning. You know, when you drink, it's not like as soon as you pay your tab and leave, the alcohol goes away. Alcohol sucks because it stays with you for a long time. As soon as the buzz wears off, then you feel sluggish and retarded, and the hangover takes over, and as you get older, the hangovers are worse, and it takes days, and it's just so ugly. But for me, it wasn't about what alcohol gave me. It was more about what it took away from me. Like, I would basically drink until I was numb and couldn't feel anything. But the problem with that was, by the time you get to the point where you're numb, I was basically almost unconscious, like, because the stress doesn't go away. And all alcohol does is postpone the inevitable whatever that you need to face up to. And I didn't know how else to cope with the stress that I was going through. I was going to the gym regularly. Lifting weights is kind of how I get high these days. That's the endorphins from a good hard workout, like the big stuff like squats and bench press, standing military press, pull-ups, like a good, like, I feel dizzy after my squats. Like, that's how it should be. The endorphins from that are great, but it wasn't enough. And even riding my bike, I remember riding from Ramsey to Bears Paw Community Center on my road bike. I got to the top, got off my bike at the community center, and I was like, yeah, no, I feel a lot better. And then suddenly the anxiety kicked in, and I was like, no, I don't. And I mean, that's like a 60 to 90 minute ride with some big hill climbs in there, and that still wasn't enough. After 3 hours of riding my bike, like round trip, all the way back home, it was like the anxiety finally started to calm down a notch, but it was taking so much for me to knock it down. It was unreal. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It was truly terrible, and that kind of went on for it was 5 years, 2013 till 2017, and it actually got the worst towards the end of 2016. Yeah, 2015 through 2017 were the worst. That's sort of when the PTSD came in and everything else. And it wasn't that I wasn't dealing with things properly. Like, I was trying the best that I could. I used every goddamn coping mechanism I had, but just that prolonged sense of stress and the uncertainty of not knowing how things were going to work out was just killing me. And when I had my incident that was like the final spark to stop drinking, it was profound to me, like, to realize how quickly you can go from being sick to being criminally charged. And that was pretty crazy. If anything, I think it really illustrates the importance of mental health and why it's imperative that people stay on top of things like drinking, even, I'm going to say, marijuana. Abusing any of that stuff to try to numb yourself to get through for whatever reason, whatever it is that's stressing you out, is such an unhealthy way to do it. And I know that if you don't have a lot of money, if you're working a lot of hours, the economy's unstable, there's all kind of factors working against you to be able to deal with things in a proper, healthy way. Like, I feel like I'd give my left nut to be able to ride my bike as much as I used to. But with the way the economy is, you kind of, if you find a job that pays the bills, you suck it up and get it done. And that's kind of how I see it. I know a lot of people say you should follow your dreams. I've had a lot of passions through the years. I worked hard at a lot of things, and I've seen that it's not always, I don't know, it doesn't always work out the way that you want it to. And you could be persistent and work at it your whole life. But there's, if you're not making money at it, that's kind of the bottom line. If you can't pay your bills, you're probably just spinning your wheels and wasting your time. I think building equity is extremely important. It gives you opportunity. So maybe right now I suck it up for 10 years, try to pay off as much of my mortgage as I can, and then maybe in 10 years I can slow down and reevaluate and maybe transition into a position that's not so demanding of my time. But there is no one right path, but I know it's hard to be able to reach out and deal with things when you're already at your limit. But you've got to find a way. A gym membership is only like $30 a month. There's a good start. Yoga drop-in sessions are really good. Seeing a therapist, I know it can be extremely expensive if you don't have health coverage and benefits. If you do and you're really stressed out, I can't recommend enough how important it is that you go and do that. These are things I don't talk about, but I've had 3 psychiatrists in my life since 2008. The first one was just because I had terrible role models growing up. My mother was emotionally unavailable and father was gone. So I had to grow through adolescence while trying to understand my parents' trauma and somehow grow into being a healthy adult. And then when you reach adulthood, everyone suddenly looks at you and expects you to be this competent, sane adult. And they're like, what the fuck is wrong with you when you're not? People are so ignorant and so stupid because they have no fucking idea what it's like when you grow up and you don't know how to deal with things properly. So the first psychiatrist I had, he changed my life. And there's things there that I've taught to other psychiatrists, actually, that I learned from him. I hate Facebook. It's not a good venue to release anything personal, so I'm not comfortable doing this right now at all. I really don't like it. But the reason I thought it might be a good idea to do this is because there were so many people that were curious about what it's like to not drink. So whatever your reason is for drinking too much and looking for the motivation or the inspiration, I'm here to tell you to fucking do it, man. Stop drinking. It's been great for me. I bought a house this year. I bought a motorcycle last year. The money I saved on alcohol probably paid for 5 months of payments on my motorbike. So put that into perspective for you. The other thing, think of the productivity you lose when you're hungover. A hungover, useless bag of shit. Days. Count those days in the entire year. Those are days that you could have been doing anything. You could have studied new recipes, food to cook for yourself at home, to entertain your significant other, to enrich your own life, books you could have read, mountains you could have hiked. These are all things you could have done if you weren't hungover. And that's the way I look at it. This is what motivates me. Instead of going out and getting drunk, like piss drunk on a Friday night and being a bag of crap until Tuesday or Monday, now I can actually wake up early on Saturday and Sunday, ride my bike, go to the gym, go hiking, get my groceries, do my meal prep for the week, all kinds of things. It's a snowball effect. And that can either be used in a good way or a bad way. Really, it's up to you. And quitting alcohol was really it was a big part, but it was just one part of reframing things mentally. The biggest thing for me now is just gratitude. I learned some humbling lessons when I worked up north the first time. How to appreciate those small moments, seeing the sun rise and the sun set every day was kind of what helped to calm me and keep me grounded and get me through. Going to the gym always helps. But more and more over the last couple of years, there's so much suffering in this world that I truly feel thankful for everything that I have. And my life isn't perfect by any means. There's still a lot of things I wish I had. Not material things, but just better things that I hope in time I'll find. But at the same time, I'm still extremely grateful for everything that I do have, for the second chance. Not everybody gets a second chance. So give yourself one. All right. I was going to try and make it through this. But I knew I'd touch a nerve somewhere. So the last thing I want to say is the importance of taking regular vacations. And it doesn't matter whether you drink or not. If you're stressed out, you work a lot of hours, or you work 2 jobs or 3 jobs, you're trying to make it through. Everyone says, oh, hustle, right? That's how you get ahead. But that's not true. You gotta give yourself breathing room. You gotta give yourself regular breaks. You need to reward yourself. You don't necessarily need to post it all on social media. I'll support you when you do, though, because I totally get it. But you gotta be able to give yourself a reward. Find a cheap flight somewhere and go. At least once a year. This has been a long winter. Even if it hasn't, winter sucks. This is the perfect time to go sit on a beach for a week and absorb some sun and catch up on vitamin D and whatever else, right? But I think I've kind of glossed over a lot of different things, and even at that, this has gone a lot longer than I was expecting it to. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I'm going to cut it here for now. All right, adios.